Okay, we've been out here for like 15 minutes and not a single person has honked. Now granted, only one lady drove by and she just looked confused, but I'm telling you, this is one of those guitars that for every person who loves it, 10 people absolutely hate it. This, my friends, is a 1979 hardtail Fender Stratocaster in the highly divisive Antigua burst finish. And if you don't believe me, here's what some people from around the internet had to say about these. Antigua is the ugliest finish ever created. Looks like creamy dog diarrhea. Worst things ever. 1, Antigua. 2, people who write in all caps. Antigua looks like a dirty old sock. Antigua looks like snot burst to me. I didn't know used cigarette filter was a color option. It goes on and on. You get the idea. But besides the rather interesting finish, Strats made in 1979 get a pretty tough rap, but I'm here today as a self-proclaimed defender of fugly guitars to tell you that this is actually a really awesome guitar with a pretty cool history. And while there's lots of claims about these floating around, I wanted to get some accurate info right from the source, so I sat down with Fender's Al Abbasi to set the record straight. Hey Al! Thank you so much for doing this. Let's just kick this off. My first question for you is, what's the history of the Antigua burst finish?
This is born out of basically builds of Coronado 2s that were happening in the late 60s. And the Coronado 2s have this nice binding around the edge. These are semi-hollow, instruments that Fender was making in the late 60s. And the edge of the binding sort of got burned or scorched in the production process. And so instead of throwing away these beautiful instruments, they decided to develop a finish that would allow them to still use the paint jobs, right? So they developed the Antigua finish to kind of cover up some of the small burns that were around the edge of the binding there.
Was it popular at the time?
I think back then, it was just as polarizing as it is today, with some people either loving it and thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread, and other people thinking, wow, that's just really too odd for me to even consider liking.
So CBS takes over Fender in 1965, and they change a bunch of things with the guitars. And I know that this era gets a pretty tough rap, but I also feel like now people are kind of coming around. Why do you think people are changing their view on it? And I guess, what do you think about this era?
I think the 70s, it kind of gets a bad rap because, as you discovered, there's still plenty of examples of fine instruments that were made in the 70s. Even some of the advancements in the 70s were actually improvements that are great that we still use today, like the headstock adjust truss rod. And we just have a little bit better consistency now building our guitars than maybe they did in the 70s. Even the 70s Tellys and Strats, some of them are great. I mean, even on the Antigua finish, I'm personally a big fan of the Antigua finish.
Okay, well, that was my next question. What are your opinions on this look?
I'm in the camp that thinks it's, I don't even think it's so ugly it's cool. I actually think the color is nice. It's got a very interesting burst that goes from that yellow to the outside burst, which is almost like kind of green and gray. I love it.
I do too. And you're one of the few people who seems to share that opinion. Al, thank you so much for doing this. I truly appreciate your expertise.
Yeah, it was fun, Steve. Nice to meet you, man.
And I'll take a second here to quickly let you know that for a limited time, we're reopening the complete Samurai Guitar Theory experience over my course platform, samuraiguitartheory.com. This bundle includes all the courses I've made and teaches you the system that I use every day to make music. You'll learn why music works the way it does in my courses, The Rudiments and Beyond the Basics, as we study music theory from the ground up with an emphasis on why this stuff is important for guitar players. In the craft of soloing, we look at the art of musical storytelling through guitar solos. You'll learn how to create more interesting, engaging, emotional solos through your phrasing, note choices, as well as a variety of other techniques. In the style of soloing, we look at adding the fun stuff, the cherry on the cake. This is the stuff that takes a solo home and really impresses people. Self-harmonizing your lines, applying alternate chords over top, techniques you may not have thought of. You're not going to want to miss the stuff that we talk about in this one. We're keeping the back to school sale short this year, so for a limited time, you can get all my courses bundled together for as cheap as we've ever sold them if you use promo code BACKTOSCHOOL23 at checkout. You can find more information at samuraiguitartheory.com. I've also got up links in the description. Anyways, let's get back to it. All right, I'm thinking rig-wise, let's keep this pretty simple. For an amp, I'm gonna use my Fender Twin Reverb with a single 15 in it. And the overdrive is coming from the classic TS-808 Tube Screamer, Walrus Audio Jupiter for the fuzz, and how about the Exotic Effects XW1 for a little bit of wah action. Got a Sennheiser 421 mic on the speaker, which I basically always use to mic guitars, as well as the lightsaber-looking Royer 121 ribbon mic. And together, this is gonna give us a really nice, robust sound. For more information on any of this gear, I got some links in the description. And if you would like me to give you these guitar pedals, thanks to my buddies at Sweetwater, we're giving them away. The link to that is in the description. It's completely free to enter. Anyways, let's get patched in and start making some sounds. So this guitar came into my life in a pretty uneventful way. It was a local online listing. The seller was a metalhead who I guess decided that the Stratocaster life was no longer for him. I met him in the Costco parking lot, bought this off of him, and then of course went and bought a 99-cent hot dog and 20 pounds of mixed nuts. And the first big thing that stood out to me is that it's in about as good shape as you're ever gonna find a 40-year-old guitar. There's a couple minute bumps on the body, the tiniest bit of wear on the neck, and the pick guard is ever so slightly starting to flake, but besides that, you'd swear this is a recent reissue. And what's crazy is it's not like it wasn't played. The frets were worn down to absolutely nothing before I got it refretted. I just think whoever's owned it for the 4 decades has never gigged with it and treated it especially well. And listen, I get that the finish is unique. In a way, the yellowish hue kind of reminds me of the diapers that I dealt with in the first few months of my son's lives. But I don't know, something about these traditional guitars with an obscure element that puts off most people for some reason draws me in. And if you don't like this aesthetic, I get it. It's bold, it's not for everyone. But for a while, the general consensus among guitar players was that Strats from 1979 were not good. This is the first Fender from the 70s I've spent any real time with, and I gotta tell you, it's really making me question that dark cloud that seems to follow these instruments around. Now, one of the biggest complaints from this era was consistency. Fender was just churning out so many guitars that they didn't have the workforce to properly scan for quality control. So I'm sure some of them have issues. I feel like this one's a hit though, and I think it would be a mistake to just write off all 1979 Strats. Another issue is that they've got a reputation for being super heavy. It hasn't bothered me yet, but we're gonna run a little test here. Got my trusty luggage scale here, cause ain't no way I'm ever paying those fucking airlines any oversized fees. Fender Stratocaster from 1979, weighing in at 6.4 pounds. And now let's try my Mod Shop Strat from 2023. This one weighs 7.7 pounds. So, yeah, the old one, fair bit lighter. Fender also went from a 4-bolt neck to a 3-bolt neck in this era, and some people claim that this created tuning issues because the neck's not as stable. It hasn't bothered me, but granted I don't have an especially aggressive style. Could be that that's why the metal guy wanted to sell this. I'd say the pickups would really be my only point of contention. They're a little bit bright and lack the warmth and depth that I usually gravitate towards. If this were my only guitar, I'd be swapping them out. However, for a guy that has an inappropriately large amount of Strats, it is kind of nice to have something different. And besides the funky finish, a big thing I like is that you get that vintage guitar mojo at a pretty affordable price because nobody really likes these. I mean, let's see what it would cost if I mock this guitar up at Fender's Mod Shop. So I've got pretty close here, and yeah, the real one cost a couple $100 more. And really, it's completely arbitrary, but I feel like 1979 is the cutoff for vintage. In the early 80s, Fender starts reverting back to some pre-CBS features, like check out the logo on my Strat from the 80s. This is pretty much the same logo that Fender would have used from 1950 whatever to 1965. And to me, this guitar does not feel like a vintage guitar at all. Of course, forget about the Floyd Rose, that was added after the fact. Does it really matter though? I don't know. This guitar is not leagues better than everything else I own in the way that a pre-CBS Strat feels, but it does kind of have a bit of extra pizzazz. It feels a little bit special to play it, and I think that does affect how I sound and how I play. Could it be the placebo effect? Yeah, sure, but I mean, the placebo effect still does do something. It does kind of look like an unhealthy bodily function though, doesn't it? And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The Antigua Strat, love it or hate it. You can let me know what you think of this guitar down in the comment section. And remember, I'm doing a giveaway for the guitar pedals that I used today. You can enter that using the link in the description. And don't forget, if you want to learn my system for making music, you can check out the complete Samurai Guitar Theory experience. That's all my courses, as cheap as I've ever sold them. Use promo code BACKTOSCHOOL23, the link to that as well in the description. Thank you all for watching. Look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon. Hey, Ben, come here. I got a question for you. What do you think of this guitar?